Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stoliarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. Today is Sunday, August 17th, 2025, and we have an important conversation in store for you on ways to accelerate the availability of emerging medical treatments to patients who need them the most. And joining us today is our distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers, members, advisors, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our 2024 U.S. Vice Presidential Candidate and Director of Community and Citizen Science, Daniel Tweed, our 2020 Vice Presidential Candidate, Liz Parrish, who is also the founder and CEO of BioViva, our member from Texas, who heads the Texas Transhumanist Party, Alan Crowley, our friend David Wood, who is the founder of London Futurists and the executive director of the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, and our special guest today, a returning guest who is very much admired throughout our community, a good friend of mine, Dr. Bill Andrews, founder and CEO of Sierra Sciences, and the biotechnology advisor of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And today, Bill will be discussing Best Choice Medicine. It's a new proposed pathway to provide possible life-saving experimental treatments to patients suffering from aging-associated non-communicable diseases who would otherwise not survive without treatment. So, Bill, welcome, and please let me know when you're ready to begin with your presentation, and we will share it up here for our audience to see.
I'm ready.
Okay, so let's see. I will pull up your screen here, but I see myself. So let's start with the other slide for a moment. So this is the slideshow that you have, which is static.
Let me go.
So there is a paper that Bill Andrews co-authored
along
with Liz Parrish. Yes. So let's add your other presentation to the stage for a moment. Here it is.
You see Please kind proceed. Of like a red screen. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of us think of aging as something like this. We hear expressions all the time like aging gracefully and finesse with finesse and all kinds of things that make us make some of us think that aging is good and something that we should all embrace. And that's wrong. Those of us that have experience working in assisted living homes or nursing homes or hospices know that aging can be like this in a lot of the cases. And I'm just going to push the hide button here so that this thing at the bottom disappears. Oops, that didn't work. Okay, hold on. Okay, can you still see my pictures here?
Yes, we can see your picture.
Because there was something on my screen that I had to close and it made me disappear. Okay, so now this is something that we have to do something about. And it's not just, we don't want to just make people look healthy and stuff like this when they get older. We want, the goal would be to have something more like this, where people are feeling young, looking young, behaving young, etc. This is something, now, I want to say aging is a stupid thing, in my opinion. And you can go to YouTube videos and you can find where I have YouTube videos on why we age, how not to age. And we age because it was evolutionary advantageous for our species to eliminate the longer lived after we raised our young, because it increases diversity within our species, and increased diversity within our species increases, and this is true for every species, not just humans, it increases the species' ability to survive rapidly changing environments. So at least it increases the ability of some members of the species to survive rapidly changing environments. And now we're in control of our own evolution. I was watching a presentation by Liz Parrish the other day on superhumans, and she talked about how in the 1600s, 50% of us died from infectious diseases. But nowadays, only 3% of us die from infectious diseases. And that's because humans now have the ability to control their own evolution. We don't have to rely on the 300,000 years of human evolution anymore, because in the last several thousand years, we have really figured out how to start controlling it ourselves. Now, there's something that's coming along now called the silver tsunami. And that's partially because we've been partially successful at dealing with the aging problem. And the silver tsunami is the fact that now that people are living longer and healthier, a lot of the world is going to start suffering from too many longer lived people and not enough shorter lived people to take care of these people. And this is especially going to be true in Japan, where in 2050, 40% of Japan's population will be over 65, which means only 60% will be under 65. And they're going to have to be, those under 65 are going to have to be doing all the other jobs that exist in the world. And there's not going to be enough people to take care of those people that need assistance that are over 65. So this is another reason why we have a lot more work to do to solve the aging problem. And so instead of letting all these people get old, one solution to this silver tsunami is to keep them young, or make them young. Okay, keep them part of the workforce. Make it so that they don't need somebody else to take care of them. Okay, so I've always been of the mind that we need to make the world happier and healthier. This has been a mission of mine my entire life. I have been involved in so many things. This is a list of a lot of different products that I have developed, invented, or co-invented that have been all geared towards the idea of making life for humans happier and healthier, and pets also. I don't want to go through this list, but you can see human growth hormone, tissue plasminogen activator, which are big drugs that are used everywhere. There's a lot of cancer treatments that I've developed that you can see below. Beta seron, the first drug for treating multiple sclerosis. My whole life, especially in the biotech industry, has been to try to develop ways of treating people to make people happier and healthier. Okay, so about 12 years ago, I met Liz Parrish. And a few years before that, she started asking the questions, why are there no cures for diseases that we've known about for centuries? And so she started really looking into this and started finding out that one of the big problems was funding. And so she contacted me one day because she had learned about telomere biology and thought that telomere biology was something that should be funded because it had an opportunity to solve a lot of the problems. And I was on my way back from Victoria up in Canada, where I'd been given a presentation. And I stopped in Seattle to meet with her and her partner, who had co-founded a company called Biotrove. Okay, the whole reason for this company was to try to find funding for the researchers that were trying to make the world happier and healthier. Okay, so she and I met. I was impressed with her enthusiasm and determination to actually do something to help with the problems of the world right now. And so shortly thereafter, she started finding out the reality of the situation, that it really is hard to get funding when most investors, et cetera, are more interested in a quick return on investment and not interested in funding things that are going to take a long time to get a return on their investment. So she started a company called BioViva to start becoming more active in this role of trying to find ways of curing diseases that we've known about for centuries. And she went and got an MBA, and she did her thesis, so to contribute. Her mission wasn't to try to benefit herself. Okay, so when she first came to me, so when she first started finding out that it was tough for people to find funding to do research, she came to me, she showed up at my work one day and said, I would like to treat myself with one of your gene therapies. And she didn't say, I'm depressed at how much I'm aging. Can you do something to help me? She said, I want to treat myself with your gene therapy so that I can show the world that it's safe and efficacious. And I mean, I didn't consider her the perfect model for showing efficacy for aging, but it was worthwhile to let her try it to show safety. But at the same time, I was kind of worried, and so I told her, don't tell anybody where you got it from. But, you know, because I was afraid that if she had some negative consequences, I might end up being in prison. So she kept it a secret. So she went and treated herself, showed that it was safe, stuff. And then unfortunately, big problem in this field, there's so much controversy about the fact that there are a lot of charlatans in the field, and so it's guilt by association. So people started saying that she was making it all up. She didn't really treat herself. So I actually agreed to actually admit that I was the one that provided her with the gene therapy, and she really did, and moving forward. But that still wasn't enough. She went and got an MBA, and the mission that she did, the reason why she got the MBA was to pursue best choice medicine. Okay, and that was what her MBA thesis was on. I was a reviewer of that thesis, and I was actually blown away with the idea. It wasn't, I mean, a lot of people have thought about some things like this before in the past, and I'm going to talk about a few of the things that have been done before. But there was this enthusiasm and determination again to really make this happen that really got to me, and so I got actually involved. And the solution to all the problems that I had just discussed above, and many, many more, is best choice medicine. So after she got her MBA, and she and I went ahead and published Best Choice Medicine in the Journal of Biomedical and Allied Research. This is the title right there. And so let me just really quickly just describe what best choice medicine is. Best choice medicine is let terminally ill people, and as well as people living lives that are not worth living, choose to test any experimental treatments of their choice in hopes of saving their own lives. I agree with Liz Parrish. I think it's just complete nonsense that if somebody's told that they have 6 months to live, and they know of somebody that thinks they have a possible cure for their disease, the FDA says you're not allowed to take it because it might harm you. There's other reasons too. For instance, it might cause abuse of the whole system of regulating drugs and stuff. But the point is that that person then dies, and that person didn't get a chance to try, even if it was a low probability of success, didn't even get a chance to try something that they thought could possibly save their lives. So this has got to be something where they can even try to use a treatment that hasn't even been tested in animals if they choose. There shouldn't be any restrictions on their choice of what they want to try. And if they can't find anything, they should be allowed to have the choice of letting themselves be frozen while they're still alive, because there's a lot of possibility that waiting until after you've died and freezing might be too late. It might not be something that we can recover from. Better chances are if you freeze yourself while you're still alive. So let it be their choice, and all within the US. The patient's choice should be the best choice medicine. And that's the whole point of this. So what's really a key part of best choice medicine is to have a committee of some kind that does what's called critical meta-analysis. And that's to really find out what is good and what's not just because it got published in a peer-reviewed literature or because it got approved by the FDA, but because it's got a good experimental design, there's good data analysis on it, the whole concept of the treatment that is being reviewed is logical, there's the probability of success, the probability of everything about it makes sense. There's a lot of common sense statistics that make a lot of sense. There's statistical theory involved. Sensible conclusions are drawn from the data. And because this is still a work in progress, anything that I say in this presentation, I'm going to be ending with what else, because I'm actually reaching out to the Transhumanist Party right now and members of the Transhumanist Party to help with this, okay? I'm thinking we have to make this happen, and soon. And so what I'm going to be hoping is that I'll get a lot of people on board to participate on this call, to participate, and people who will listen to this video to participate and come up with ideas to contribute towards this concept of best choice medicine. Okay, now the reason why we have to have critical meta-analysis is because you can find anything you wish to be true in the scientific peer-reviewed literature. There is so much that falls through the cracks. It is so easy for companies that want to promote a product to actually get a paper submitted and it's peer-reviewed and get it submitted and then be able to claim that, hey, I got a peer-reviewed article that proves that my product works. And this is this example that I have here isn't an example of a product, but it is an example of how there's something wrong with the peer-reviewed system. Okay, this is two papers that came out in 2000. And I picked these two papers because they are very close to my research, okay, dealing with telomerase. Okay, so this top paper, published in October 15, 2000, says that when treated with telomerase, the cells become immortal. Okay, then the second paper says when treating with telomerase, the cells don't become immortal. Okay, these papers deal with the exact same cells, the exact same conditions. Everything about these papers are identical. And surprisingly, they were published only 2 weeks apart from each other in the same journal. Okay, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in terms of peer-reviewed literature. And it means you can't trust anything, because how could reviewers review one paper and then review another paper that gives the exact opposite conclusion and allow both to be submitted for being included in their journal? Okay, so best choice medicine. The whole idea is that it be a new agency housed under the Department of Health and Human Services, shown here, right next to the FDA. Okay, this is not a way of circumventing the FDA completely. It would only be allowed if people were told by their doctors that they have an incurable disease and they have like 6 months to a year to live. Then they would fall under the jurisdiction of best choice medicine. This should be thought of as something that will help the FDA, okay, not interfere with the FDA. So the best choice medicine would have to have some boards, some scientific and medical boards. And the boards have to be focused on what's best for the patient in this case, not what's best for regulations and et cetera. Okay, so the first thing that the medical board has to do is ask, does the patient qualify to be able to participate, to be able to try any drug that they choose? Okay, now this question opens a whole can of worms, and I would say it could be one of the biggest obstacles to making best choice medicine actually exist. And that's that as soon as somebody gets told that they do qualify And and they're told that they're allowed to choose any treatment that they want, even if it hasn't been tested in animals. This opens the door for pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that to say, hey, why don't you test my drug, even though it won't cure your aging, because you're allowed to treat yourself with anything, and I'll pay your family like $500,000 after you pass away. And so we could suddenly find a lot of patients suddenly applying for stuff like that, thinking they can't be cured, but at least they know that their family will be well cared for after they pass away. I mean, that's a good aspect of this thing, but it's actually a bad thing because it opens up a lot of opportunities for abuse. But I think before I get to a lot of more details about this best choice medicine, I think the solution to this is that best choice medicine has to hold the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, providing the treatments accountable. So the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, that come to best choice medicine say that they want to provide their treatment to patients that qualify. Best choice medicine then reviews it, and then the company is then protected from criminal negligence if the drug doesn't work. But if they don't go through best choice medicine and the patient dies, and the person's going to die anyway, but if they believe that the patient died earlier than expected because of the treatment, then the pharmaceutical company has to be held responsible for criminal negligence. Okay, so that would be, I think, the solution to that. I just wanted to get that out of the way before I go on. But other things that the medical boards have to do is they have to review patients' choice for treatments and advice. Okay, so if a patient has ideas about how they want to get treated, the board can review and give advice on the treatments that the patient might not have access to. They can also advise alternative options. And I underline options here because the board isn't supposed to guide the patient into making best suggestions. The board is supposed to provide the options and still let the patient choose. Then they can also do due diligence on those providing the treatment, such as the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, small biotech companies, and find out if they're an organization that can be trusted. They can protect the patient from abuse, as I said before. Drug companies might start using these patients as guinea pigs in experiments because of the fact that they're legally allowed to try anything they want. But the best choice medicine boards would also be networking the suppliers, such as the pharmaceutical companies, with the patients and vice versa. And again, what else? Okay, so I'd like everybody to keep thinking about how they can help with moving this mission forward. But the key thing is to remember that it's the patient's choice. Okay, and that's what best choice medicine is all about. When you are somebody that has been told that you have 6 months to a year to live, it's your choice. Okay, another thing about the key thing, that's why I put this all by itself, about these medical boards is that they would be overseeing databases of patients, physicians, treatment options, and results. And this might not necessarily become public information because of the fact that pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that might not want their results released, especially if the patient ends up having some negative effects. But the pharmaceutical company at least is given the option of fixing those problems if there is any unforeseen negative results. So we don't know. This is something that's got to be discussed in future discussions, how to deal with these results. Do they become public information? Or do the pharmaceutical companies have the ability to restrain them from being public? The next question that comes in, how do you define life-threatening? Okay, so Alzheimer's is a life-threatening disease. Anybody who has Alzheimer's has pretty much no longer than 6 years to live. And when they reach a point of not even remembering who their family members are, they have less than a year to live. Okay, now, of course, at this time, these patients aren't going to be able to choose a treatment, but they can choose treatments beforehand, let their family members know this is what I want to do. And there's also power of attorneys that can be applied so that when they do get treated, the power of attorney can choose the treatment. But so people with Alzheimer's are an example of somebody that should be considered somebody that would qualify for best choice medicine and be able to be treated with anything they choose. But getting back to aging in general, even getting old or longer lived is a life-threatening disease. Okay, so a healthy 89-year-old, and key is they're healthy 89-year-old, has an 11% chance of dying by the time they're 90. Okay, that's high risk. Okay, and so even when you're an 89-year-old, you should be given the option of choosing anything you would like, anything you think could really save your life. Now, the question comes down to always asking the question, when is the risk from no treatment greater than the risk from treatment? And I can guarantee that the risk from no treatment when you have Alzheimer's and you're 89 years old is a lot higher than the risk from the treatment. Okay, and as long as the Best Choice Medicine Board has reviewed it enough to show that the risk is safe enough to proceed. And sometimes the most serious risk to the patient is not treating the patient. And that's something that's always got to kept in mind by the board and everybody else involved in the regulations. Okay, so this number varies depending on who you talk to, but I always just go with, because I'm not keeping count, 150,000 people die every day. If we eliminated aging, half of us would still be alive and healthy in 1,000 years from now. And here's a reference where a study has been to come up with that. But the reason why I'm presenting this at a Transhumanist Party meeting is because half of us, what about the other half? Okay, there are a lot of people that are having debilitating diseases. They're living lives that are not worth living because of debilitating diseases and things that only the Transhumanist Party can help, and the whole focus of transhumanists in general. And so I'm calling on the Transhumanist Party to actually participate in everything that we're talking about here with best choice medicine. And so I want to point out, some people are going to say, that, we shouldn't be doing this, it's wrong and stuff like that. But there is icing on the cake that could be used to persuade some of these people to accept something like best choice medicine. And that clinical testing will cost a lot less and take less time. Now, that's not a goal of mine. My goal is to get people happier and healthier, to treat them. And yeah, as a side effect, clinical testing will cost less and take less time because there will be so much data generated from these people. But my mission is to make certain that these people get treated irregardless, or regardless. There'd be faster drug approval. The data would be available to the FDA under conditions that I discussed before that would allow possible faster approval of treatments because they got tested in humans without possibly ever being tested in animals. More research projects would be initiated because people would know that they have new routes of getting approval that are a lot less expensive. Research will accelerate faster because of this. And then there'll be these databases that I mentioned, patients, physicians, treatment options, which I meant to include there, and results. Again, what else? Okay, so presently there are, best choice medicine isn't the only thing that's working towards this end. There has been this pay-to-play model that was launched in June 2016, where if there was a treatment and it was really expensive for doing clinical studies, the FDA was now allowing the patients to participate in the clinical studies to pay for the treatment. But the problem is, it only is allowable when the price tag is so high that the trial couldn't be done otherwise. Okay, so this opens up the door for just a few treatments. Then there was the RMAT, Regenerative Medicine Advanced Therapy, that was announced and approved in December 2016. Now, this is something, again, will allow treatments to be, where patients can get more access to these treatments, but it's only available for regenerative medicine drug candidates, such as gene therapy, which is good, but there's a lot of things that are not gene therapy that patients could benefit from. Then there's the Right to Try Act, May 2018. A lot of news coming out of Montana on this now. And this is now where patients are given the right to try, but only if the treatment has already passed phase 1 of clinical studies. And that again limits the kind of treatments that patients have. If they find a treatment that they have, but the treatment has not been tested yet through phase 1 clinical studies, they're not allowed to take it. Some new things that are just coming along recently are the FDA Modernization Act, and the FDA also has announced that they plan to phase out animal testing pretty soon. That was just recently in April 2025. And we have to see how both of these pan out yet. All right, so setting up something like best choice medicine is a really big challenge. And what are some examples of the biggest challenges ever? And what comes to mind is sending a person to the moon and starting a war on cancer. So John F. Kennedy announced in 1961, let's send a person to the moon. In 1971, Richard Nixon declared a war on cancer. Okay, now it's not the first time that there's people have been fighting cancer and stuff, but this was a big step forward in trying to get a cure for cancer. Okay, so John F. Kennedy and whoever assigned this project, Person on the Moon, to NASA. It was led by James Webb, and the majority of the work was done internally. Okay, they didn't license work out to academic labs all over the world, etc. Now, Richard Nixon and all politicians involved with him assigned the war on cancer to the National Cancer Institute, led by several people that lasted on average about 3 years each. And the majority of the work was done externally. This is where grants were offered to labs all over the world. And now the difference between Person on the Moon, people were working, even if they were off-site, not working internally, they felt like they were working for NASA. War on cancer, when people started applying for grants and getting grants, they didn't feel like they were working for the National Cancer Institute. They felt like they were working for themselves. Person on the Moon was a success. We made it. We got a person to the moon. War on cancer is still limited success. It has not really achieved anything like what the goal of getting a person on the moon. And a lot of people would have guessed finding a cure for cancer probably would have been a lot easier than getting a person to the moon. But what I think we learned from this is that it's important to keep things internal, to keep control of things. And I think that that's one of the things that has to be done with best choice medicine. Now, I mentioned best choice medicine has to have a committee that's doing critical meta-analysis. But I think that critical meta-analysis cannot be licensed out to labs all over the world. It has to be done internally. So people have to be a part of best choice medicine. One new exciting thing that's coming across really soon is that there's now let's see, I'm forgetting the name, but there's going to be a rally for healthy longevity. There's going to be a march on Washington in September 2026. The Coalition for Radical Life Extension has gotten the okay to have this happen. And best choice medicine is the #1 thing on this list to have the rally endorse. They're also going to be classifying aging as a treatable condition and also expedite approval for longevity therapies. All right, so September 2026, that's too long from now. I think we need to be doing something sooner, maybe have a lot of stuff done in time for this rally that could contribute to this rally, And again, I'm thinking that the Transhumanist Party is a source of getting a lot of stuff done, joining forces with Liz Parrish and me to make this happen. What can we do now? Okay, well, funding is the big problem. As I'd mentioned, that's how Liz Parrish got into where she is right now, because she had learned, just like everybody else, that funding is a real nightmare. Finding funding. Where's this funding going to come from? How much funding is needed to set up this best choice medicine? I mean, a lot of people that are going to be on this committee, they're going to need salaries. They're going to need some sort of way of paying for their participation, because not because they're not motivated without salary, but they have to survive on something. Okay, so we need to build a team now. We need to find people that are skilled at critical meta-analysis to be able to analyze these things. And as I said, there's a lot of people out there that will promote a particular product just because it has one press release or because it has one peer-reviewed study. So we have to have people on a team that know how to do critical meta-analysis. Okay, so we can do critical meta-analysis now. We can already be advising, provide an advisory resource for patients now. We could be networking suppliers and patients now. And even though we can't, so this is something we want to do in the United States, we could begin with treatments offshore, at least for now, okay, while we wait for best choice medicine to be approved in the US. Because, as I said, 150,000 people are dying every day. So let's hurry up and get this going. And again, what else? Okay, so I'm on a mission, and so is Liz Parrish, to make the world a happier and healthier place. And I got to say, a lot of people on this call that I saw, even on the advisory board, they're the same mind. I don't see any of these people trying to market products for their own benefit and stuff. I think a lot of us are here because we are all interested in making the world happier and healthier. And as I said, this whole business of aging is stupid, getting rid of the longer lived after we've raised our young. That's why the evolutionary process has evolved in aging. That's why we haven't evolved a way not to age, is because things that eliminate the longer lived after we raise our young actually contributes to the success of the survival of the species by increasing diversity. And we just have to do something about that. So in conclusion, I want to say, when a patient is suffering from a life-threatening disease or a disease that makes life not worth living, the patient's choice is the best choice. And we need to start allowing patients to be making that choice. And so I'm calling for people to support Best Choice Medicine. For more information, go to bestchoicemedicine.com. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for that presentation. And we all appreciate the importance of maximizing the ability of patients to choose. I think this is an area where all transhumanists are aligned. And Luis Arroyo points out in the chat the importance of building the U.S. Transhumanist Party so that there can be more longevity advocates who are emphasizing this right of patient choice. Now I would like to invite Liz Parrish to offer a few remarks about best choice medicine, since this was the subject of your thesis. Liz, what would you like to say to add to Bill's presentation?
Well, number one, I was completely overcome by Bill's presentation there. I think that, the things that I was heartened by and flattered by is that the truth of the matter that even though historically we're sort of made out to be these big personalities and the media kind of goes on these attacks of us, or a hero or villain, that's not the case. And
Liz cut out
Liz,
on
I
my...
think your audio cut out. Let's see. Hopefully Liz can get her audio back.
is it back now?
Yes, it's back.
Yeah, the thing is, it keeps attaching to my phone, which I'm not sure why. So I'm gonna put my phone at some distance. Anyway, I was just really flattered by Bill's presentation and his representation, and it was really true. Bill and I have been here, trying to help and rally the troops to do something, not for ourselves, but for the whole world. And if we can look at it as a mission like that, I think it will be imperative that we move forward. And, it was really with Bill's help that we got that published after I did my thesis. And so thank you so much, Bill. I just love working with you. It's been a pleasure. I've worked with Bill on it for over 10 years. And he's a really good person. And I've met a lot of people who really weren't. And I'm sad to say. So I really believe that if we take this mission to heart and we push it forward, we could save millions of lives and eventually our own potentially. And that's fantastic. It's so important that people who can't speak for themselves today, who are dying, have someone speak for them. We've had family members now choose to be humanely euthanized. And why are we allowed to do that? I mean, I believe in that choice, but why are we allowed to do that but not try new medicine? It's because of an inherent distrust of a system that we didn't build. This was a system that was vastly politically built by the wrong political side. And, we need to bring heart back into medicine, caring back into our neighborhoods. We have to build a different culture for the future. And the Best Choice Medicine Plan gives us the ability to do that. And putting it under the Health and Human Services and removing it from a connection of the US FDA allows us to establish something new for patients who are dying today. And if we can't help those patients who are dying today, if the best thing that we can give them is a faster death, if they can afford it, we have failed. We know that medicine has come farther than that. And we know that in order to understand if we have cured aging or not, we actually have to try drugs in humans. So, I think that we're going to have to help people who have become very confused and distrustful of an entire system, rightly so. From the media to the drugs to everything else, everything has become big business. We need to sort of create a transparency for new business and new cultures and new ideas to come in. And we need to really be fighting for our biological freedom. So, this is imperative, and I was just really impressed that Bill was going to do this talk today, and he is the best speaker on this. I just can't believe it. I'm absolutely honored to work with Bill. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Liz. And to your point in regard to people being portrayed as heroes and villains, Daniel Tweed writes, the media thrives on heroes and villains and wants to simplify to that level, much like the two-party duopoly in politics. And he also observes it's unfortunate that the majority of people may actually be afraid of more freedom, including having more agency over their own power of life expansion. So those are, let's say, troubling observations. But yes, a lot of people may have concerns that if maximal patient choice is allowed, perhaps some patients might make the wrong choices. And our friend Eric Hennigan, who writes Let's Cure Aging, by the way, he does point out that in general, the more desperate a person is, the less rational their decision-making process. And I understand that in the best choice medicine pathway, there is this review board that helps guide the patient toward making an informed decision. So perhaps you could discuss that in a bit greater depth. How can such a review board or oversight committee help to, let's say, counter any consequences of that kind of desperation where a patient might be perhaps overly inclined to select a treatment that most people would recognize just won't work for that condition.
Well, if you look at the law in the Bahamas that just went in, a lot of people think, the Bahamas just opened up to gene therapy, and literally there are companies just putting pamphlets out that they're doing business in the Bahamas. That's not the case. We work with them on that. There's an ethics board and a scientific review board, and there's a second scientific review board behind that, just in case the first one can't handle the material. So the technology that comes in is the most likely to help. It's not the Wild West. It's not, oh, we have a drug. I think that that's what a lot of charlatans in this area want. They just want you to say, oh, it's just legal to do. And then they don't read what it actually says. So in this case, there's an indemnification because a scientific review has done its best effort to understand the molecular mechanism of the drug. And an ethics board has made its best effort to decide that patients within a certain parameter qualify for that drug. So this is what we don't really have with the US FDA now. So the US FDA, if you want to get into a clinical trial right now and you have a life-threatening illness, you have to meet a onslaught of criteria. If you have comorbidities, you won't qualify. If you're over 80, you won't qualify. Even if you could have lived to 110, they'll just let you die. There's a whole bunch of criteria that doesn't get met. And so we cannot continue to go with mantras. A drug should be safe before it's used in patients. Everyone on the planet can agree with that. And yet we have a myriad of unsafe drugs that were either approved and pulled within a year or were used in clinical studies and found not to be safe. So what we have to do is we also have to realize that patients are intelligent. We have worked with a myriad of medical tourism companies over the years, over the last 8 years. And the idea that you're intelligent enough to decide whether somebody should take something, but they're not intelligent enough if they're going to die in the next 6 months, it's just absolutely false. Get out of your head. Stop thinking you're the smartest person in the room because these people need access to drugs. And if a scientific review board has said, in your condition, this is safe enough to use, it's worth the try. And an ethics review board has said that too. The public needs to get out of other people's use of medicine. Stop blocking people from saving their own lives. Stop with these crazy mantras that, oh, it sounds so logical and we all believe it until it's your head on the chopping block or your child or your parents. This is a mandate that we stop the mantras of bullshit so that people can actually live. And that these boards are built correctly. So there is, look at this drug that they had for Alzheimer's. It was to help diminish beta amyloid plaques in the brain. It got approved until they found out that it was actually detrimental to the patients, and a whole bunch of people in the US FDA were shareholders. This is why there's no trust in the system. We have put the wrong people, and we haven't really done the checks and balances to make sure that the right people continue to stay in positions of power and decision making. And recently, my own company just last week was attacked for a paper that had been published for 3 years on one photo that was replaced a year ago because they didn't realize, no reviewer, we had the best reviewers in the world, we didn't realize that one photo, there was no material to the outcome. What I'm trying to tell you, there is an attack on our industry. There's an attack on people living a long time. We need to get qualified people in so we can start saving lives, because it's one by one, the media and the big interests are trying to make this whole thing fall. With patient data, with humans living healthier longer, that's how this whole industry is going to survive. We have to let the truth prevail and give scientists, ethics board, and the patients the right to move forward.
And let me add, in responding to Eric's point, I did mention that there's a can of worms, that as soon as Best Choice Medicine approves somebody to be able to take any drug of their choice or treatment of their choice, that does open a problem, and that's that the patient might choose to do something that's the wrong thing to do. Okay, and that's why I was talking about this can of worms. the companies that are providing the treatments, they have to work through best choice medicine. The patient doesn't. The patient can choose anything they want, but when they get a treatment, the company they're providing the treatment is still going to be, they should work through the best choice medicine, because if they don't, they'll be guilty of criminal negligence if that person suffers any kind of symptoms that is not helping that person. So at the same time, any patient is going to want to be working with best choice medicine, because best choice medicine is going to be making the best decisions for them, or advising them. They're not going to make the decisions for them. They're going to be advising them on what decisions they should make. And yes, they're going to be desperate, okay? And that's part of the thing. But if somebody is imminently going to pass away, die, and they have no choice, I'm okay for desperation, as long as the desperation is something that really has a good chance of working, and the patient did get the opportunity to listen to the committee that best choice medicine is made up of. And let me just add one other thing, okay? Because Liz just mentioned this paper that just got retracted. I was one of the reviewers for this paper. I believe this paper that is actually regarding CMV as a vector for gene therapy is probably one of the most revolutionary things that's going to ever happen in the field of gene therapy. And I am shocked that there are people trying to block this study going on. And Liz and I are trying to right now find funding to move this forward, because I believe everything you ever hear about gene therapy and the problems that exist with gene therapy are going to be solved with this new system that Liz Parrish came up with, okay? And so I'm a little horrified with the, I want to call it corruption that exists in the world right now, of people trying to block, I forget what the term Liz used, but high profile people, things like that. And when some of these high profile people are really just trying to do their best to make the world a happier and healthier place.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for those comments. And for those who would like to read the paper in question, it's entitled New Intranasal and Injectable Gene Therapy for Healthy Life Extension. It was retracted, but not all of the authors agreed with the retraction, and Liz was among the authors who did not agree with the retraction.
Even George Church said he was completely on the fence. But when you're at Harvard, you pretty much, if somebody questions something, you have to retract. But he's quoted saying that he was on the fence. He thought it was a really good paper. I want to also point out something that's really important, because Bill and I and a lot of people here who I've supported and who've supported us over the years, you know that we come to these meetings. I did Best Choice Medicine. Then Bill picked up Best Choice Medicine with me. I've worked in several legal locations for new laws. And I want you to guess what? I've never been paid for any of it. None of it. We're not here to get rich off of somebody living. We're here to create value for the world, because otherwise there's nothing to live for. And so, we have to think about things differently. We have to think about, like, some people aren't working for money. They're working because they want a better future. And I just really wanted to point that out, because, when Bill and I talk, we never talk about that. We never talk about, these many years that we put in on the legal side of things to help people to get access. Didn't make a penny, and didn't even get paid to travel to locations to speak on it. Maybe somebody paid for an air flight and a hotel once, but that's it. This is really, we have to band together and make this happen.
Indeed. And similarly, the U.S. Transhumanist Party functions on an all-volunteer model, so we have essentially the same kind of dedication to the outcome. We want to see the outcome irrespective of who gets paid, and certainly our officers put in a lot of time and effort in the form of their contributions so that we can all one day reverse aging and live indefinitely. So thank you very much for those comments, Liz. And now we have David Wood, who has a few remarks.
Well, this is a really important initiative, and I'm honored to be part of this discussion where the best choice medicine is being presented so well. My questions and comments are about how can we band together more people in support of this initiative? How can we find allies, even within the pharmaceutical industry, or even within the regulators, even within the FDA? Because in my experience, that there are people in that industry, there are regulators who would like to have greater access to patients to experimental treatments, but they are afraid of one or two things. And so my questions are, how can we build on what Bill was already saying to provide assurance that this won't be opening a devil's tournament of strange things? So one of the concerns is that actually this is sometimes positioned as a choice between no treatment or a treatment, and the risks of both are weighed up. What's the risk of no treatment? What's the risk of a treatment? But in reality, is often there's more choices in that, because it's not just the first treatment that the patient's got in mind. The patient has learned about a treatment. They've been contacted by somebody. They have had advice, but it turns out that their situation is different from somebody else. So it may be that it's not just no treatment or the first treatment that the patient is very much keen to try. There may be a different kind of gene therapy. There may be a different kind of treatment altogether that's relevant to them. In a very small way, I had this myself. I had bad knees a few years ago, and somebody said, you need cortisone injections. And thankfully, a GP said, no, you don't. You need a proper physiotherapy. And I went to the physiotherapy and I got a very good one, and my knees are in much better shape now. So this was a case when somebody who had more expertise than me was able to talk me out of something that I wasn't even convinced of fully myself, but I was thinking about. As has been said, people in a life-threatening situation can be more desperate. And so it does come down to not just best choice medicine, but informed best choice medicine. So isn't really the key here is to be able to demonstrate how these review boards are going to scale up. Liz has already mentioned, sometimes you need more than one review board, but this costs money. It does require people to get behind it. So my suggestion is that actually maybe within 12 months, there's going to be another thing that's going to help these review boards. There's going to be another thing that's going to help the meta-analysis that Bill points to, and that is the rise of bioagents, that is AIs that have been specially trained on a broad range of medical treatments. And we often used to saying AIs are biased, and that's true if they're only trained on a very limited field. But we've got the ability now, hopefully, to let AIs read a much wider range of data. So I'm looking to the near future, people already calling 2025 the year of the DeSci summer, decentralized science summer, which is the opposite of an AI winter, by the way. The AI winter is when everybody gets depressed that the AI isn't working anymore, which has happened twice in the past, but people are looking to the release of bioagents later this summer. We've still got a few months left, which can, for the first time, pull together more data. So how will these review boards actually scale up and be able to persuade people not just to go with the first treatment that is on their mind, but sometimes to try a different sort of treatment rather than just give up and not do anything at all?
Well, we definitely don't want people going with just one treatment opportunity. I mean, it may start with only a few approved treatment opportunities that are the best for certain conditions, but the whole thing is based on a database. So if there are conditions and there are treatments, and those treatments maybe are starting to get some safety data, but they could be cross-used into different diseases, we want that all to be open so that as the treatments basically become more diverse, that people have access to more and more qualified information, and using data sets and actually having material. Of course, patients have to work with doctors and they have to sign informed consent, and they also have to sign off that it's experimental medicine. But these AI systems, one great thing about them is they can help us help the patient better understand the material as well. But AI still has to be tested. We're still doing the code keeper. We're still using AI systems to help us with papers, and it's still hallucinating every day. So we need to make sure that there's always someone, a human, also still between that data. And also, even though AI is great at picking up things that we've already done, biology is actually complex. And every body that is on this call is different from one another. And so your outcomes could be different. And so there still is a lot of human work in understanding that. The idea that, somehow an entire brain will be understood by AI, and the drugs in which would need to be used then in every different brain would be understood is a ways off. So there's always going to have to be that human component. So AI may come up with some ideas. We've used it to look at gene therapy, and some of them would be devastatingly deadly. And we know that. So, we will watch AI get better, but we will also keep an eye on AI. And I'm sure that it is quickly going to be keeping an eye on us as well. So that, maybe some red flags it can also throw in for people with different conditions, comorbidities, or different drugs that they're on. And that will help. So the two groups will help one another. But the idea that one is, well, especially AI right now, is somehow going to solve the whole problem for everyone, I don't think that that's going to happen. It could happen, but we won't understand if it happened until we do studies in humans. It will never be able to de-risk the study in humans. But Bill, I'd like to hear your answer.
Well, when it comes to AI, I've actually not been a fan of it in the past, but I've often putting AI to the test. And recently, new versions of AI have impressed me a lot. And so in fact, one of the tests that I do is, like, I'll ask, what people in the world have won a Nobel Prize and an Oscar? And I'm always disappointed that Al Gore doesn't show up as one of the answers. But now all of a sudden he's showing up. But it's so I think I'm excited right now about the future of AI and all biotech research and stuff like that, working together to come up with solutions that are. I'm more excited about them than I was before.
Even humans are limited in what they can understand. The sad fact is that many people have become experts in one field by doing a great deal of work and research. They too easily imagine they might be an expert in another field as well, because they forgot how much they had to learn to become the expert in the first place. And especially in medicine, there's so many different aspects of medicine. So somebody may be very skilled in lots of medicine, but in a new field, they may not appreciate the complexities, but still they want to lay down the law a bit too readily. So I think we need to get the whole bunch of people involved. We need to have a collaborative spirit, which is why I come back to my question: how can we get more people banding together for this, including the people who already within pharma and within the regulators, who aren't all trying to squash this. They're just concerned that people in some desperation might spend a lot of money, or they might require a lot of money to be spent, because if there's a treatment started off, there could be all kinds of complications and so on.
Yes, thank you for those remarks, David. And we have a few comments in the chat along these lines in regard to AI and its role. Mike Lazine writes, AIs right now are only as good as the humans who interact with them, and indeed the human-generated knowledge base that the AIs draw upon. For Freedom writes, we need more AI to just observe the human body, so perhaps collect data about the human body, though the AIs will need to have some sort of interface for data collection, so they can't just be essentially analytical systems, they need to have an empirical data gathering capability as well for that. Eric Hennigan fears that AI won't be able to contribute much to our understanding of biology because the complexity might be irreducible, and he notes that the Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei has the same concern. I do hope there's some reducibility, some amount of sense that the AI can glean even by accessing large amounts of data that humans individually cannot possibly read, at least not the same human, with regard to all of those vast amounts of data. And if the AI just has a much larger data processing capability than we do, it might be able to generate some insights or discover some insights that we would have missed. But it is certainly an evolving field, and there are a lot of open questions about what these AI systems can or cannot do. But to Bill's point, there are some impressive capabilities that would have been difficult to conceive of just a few years ago. So perhaps there are some grounds for hope there. Bill, would you like to elaborate?
I just don't think that AI is going to do it all by itself. Okay,
right.
I think that we're still going to have to be working together with AI, but I'm a lot more excited about that possibility just in the last few weeks.
Yes, absolutely. And I think human AI collaboration is going to be much more powerful than either AI by itself or humans by themselves. Now we have Dan Elton joining us. Yeah. Dan, I wonder if you have any questions or comments for Bill or Liz.
Well, I had a comment, which is I have been experimenting with AI to actually help with meta-analyses and reviewing the scientific literature, because it is very challenging, especially when you're looking at a complex condition like long COVID, to make sense of the literature and all of the different treatments that are being studied. And so I have been actually setting up some infrastructure to be able to scrape and pull down thousands and thousands of papers, and then call the ChatGPT API to have ChatGPT basically read all those papers at lightning speed. And initially, my plan is just to get kind of a listing of all the different things that are being studied, which for a condition like long COVID, which is actually pretty hard to get a comprehensive listing. So all that is to say, I definitely think AI could be useful just for understanding the literature. And someone mentioned, like, the quality of the AI outputs is kind of a function of the inputs. But I actually tried feeding in some scientific papers that I was pretty sure were false, and GPT-4 was actually quite skeptical as well. So I would just encourage everyone to keep an open mind about AI, as it's improving at a surprisingly fast pace, and it's also, I think they're fine-tuning it to be more to have sort of more awareness about what is trustworthy and what is not, what is true and what is false.
And Dan, I would agree. Yeah. I would agree that it is improving, but when you're looking at complex papers like gene therapy, this is where a lot of it falls apart. And I would just double check and read the papers. I think that it is getting better. We're still testing it. We just tested it again last week, and it still had hallucinations. But the problem is sometimes it's pulling from the discussion in other areas, and it thinks that like for instance, we were looking at a gene therapy delivery that was a non-vector based, and it thought it was a lenti based gene therapy. And if we would have put that into our database, that would have been vastly incorrect, and it actually could have been harmful if it was an integrating lentivirus. So instead, we had to read the paper and actually pull that. It pulled the vector out of the discussion. So I would. I know a lot of people are using it. We used it the other day, and we thought we had found the perfect database for finding names for new companies, whether there was a .com available, and what the trademark weight was on the names. And it almost in every case, even though it looked absolutely right and correct, it was wrong. So again, I would just double check it, especially if there's any sort of thing where it might appear that it's agreeing with you. I also then would, we always want to double check ourselves as well. I'm not accusing you of that. I know that you're actually very cognitively cognizant of how you're minded, and you don't have a lot of cognitive dissonance. But yeah, I still would double check it. I would take the time to read the paper. And again, Chat GPT-5 seems to be a lot cooler. You can download HTML. Claude is awesome at what we do programming. My husband works for Adobe, so they do that to double check some of the code and things like that. But yeah, again, really,
it's really good at programming. I agree. I've been surprised how much better it's gotten since GPT-4 with the with the ability for thinking or reasoning.
Yeah, I've been doing some tutorials. It is very cool. But again, when it comes to your health, please just go ahead and read the paper.
Of course, yeah.
So GTP5 is one of the ones that I just reviewed that I thought, wow, that's an amazing step forward. But the problem is AI can do meta-analysis, but it still is not capable of really doing critical meta-analysis yet. And because it doesn't, there's YouTube videos where I have compared meta-analysis to critical meta-analysis and reached opposite conclusions, because when you start, because a lot of papers get published simply because of the fact the authors are trying to promote something, okay, whether it's a product or a philosophy or something like that. And a lot of times, if you do research to prove them wrong, it's not worth publishing, okay? And so there's sometimes a weighted problems of one opinion versus another that can't be resolved unless you do critical meta-analysis, which means looking at the experimental design. Does it make sense? Is it logical? And looking at the way the data was analyzed, and it was not just were the statistics accurate, but was the statistical theory accurate? And that's something that I've had a lot of training in, was taking classes in.
I can see that. Another thing I've looked at, and other people have been looking at, is seeing if AI can detect fraud or those sort of things. And it's a challenge there as well, because it requires a very careful, finding some evidence of fraud requires just a really careful, detailed analysis. But I think with they have features now where you can increase the amount of thinking or computation, and I think it's worth continuing to test the AI to see.
Oh, trust me, we are so excited about it. Yeah, we are so excited about it. I mean, that's why we're working with it constantly, because anything that we don't need to do, especially in the Code Keeper, we would like to outsource that. But so far, on this side, it still needs a human to ensure that what it's pulling up is not a hallucination. But yeah, I mean, of course, we're pro technology, and I'm not trying to speak against it. I'm just being cautious so that people don't start to get their health information from it quite yet.
Yes, and that's a very important point. Indeed, Didier Kernel writes that he agrees with you, Liz. ChatGPT and all LLMs are still not totally reliable, and you can never copy and paste yet. So a human should always proofread the content and make any adjustments that are necessary. I think the value of subject matter expertise is actually more important than ever. So contrary to claims that AI will make specialists and knowledge workers obsolete, I disagree. AI can make knowledge workers more productive, but having deep expertise in a field is very important to even be able to tell that something is a hallucination. Because if a layperson asks a large language model to analyze, say, a vast amount of literature, and this could be scientific peer-reviewed literature on gene therapies, the layperson wouldn't know if the AI was hallucinating. It requires somebody who actually has studied gene therapies in order to be able to tell what is a hallucination. Now, David also points out what the new bioagents will probably be able to do is to suggest very interesting new hypotheses. It will then be up to human researchers to evaluate these new hypotheses. And I think that is an important point. David elaborates. It's similar to how it may take a maths genius to propose a solution to a hard maths puzzle, but an ordinary maths researcher can then verify if the solution is actually sound. So yes, there could be that kind of complementarity
And it
between
makes sense,
AI
you know,
and humans.
in the game of chess against aging, obviously a computer can do better than that. I think that I'm just saying a cautionary tale. If we keep saying, if we just wait, we might be able to do it better and safer. That is deadly to 110,000 people today. And that's going to be deadly to 36 million people today. So whenever we say, if we just wait 6 more months, and if we just then give it 8 more months, and oops, that messed up. Now everything is, or if we just give it 1 more year or 10 more years, because I have time. I'm not here for me. I'm here for the people who have no voice today. I'm here for the people who need access to this today, tomorrow, in the next year. So, we certainly are excited about these technologies. We certainly want to work hand in hand with them. We certainly want them to be exact. But right now we don't have time to wait for perfection.
Yes, indeed. And this has been very salient for me this year because I have lost several people whom I knew very well. I lost my grandfather, and I lost our good friend John Carrots, who was a U.S. Transhumanist Party officer. And just yesterday, I found out about the death of a well-known runner in northern Nevada from cancer. His name was Peter Sinnott, and he was remarkable for having won the first journal jog race in Reno in, I believe it was 1971. So this was the oldest still ongoing race in Nevada, and he was a very young man when he won it. He ran every mile at a sub 5-minute pace, and I think he held the course record for a very long time. I met him last year at the running of the journal jog, and he was 74 at the time. What I didn't know was that he had cancer when he was running the last journal jog, and he died in December of last year. I just found out about it yesterday because I looked him up, and I wanted to know how he was doing and whether he would be there at the next journal jog. And this is just such a shock because he was only 75 and he was otherwise in excellent health, but cancer got him. And Bill, I don't know if you had a lot of familiarity with him, a lot of interactions with him, but this really shocked me when I found out.
Yes, I have. I've run the journal jog many times. I know who was. I did not know he passed away until just now. Pretty sad. All right.
Yes. And I think this actually can bring us back to the discussion of the war on cancer, because Richard Nixon declared the war on cancer during the same year as the first journal jog, 1971. So people who were young back then are dying of cancer now. And 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago in 2015, we had a panel discussion entitled How Can Life Extension Become as Popular as the War on Cancer? And of course, Liz, you were one of our notable guests on that panel. And that was when you first informed the world that a patient had successfully received a combination gene therapy. We did not yet know that it was you, but you said the patient was doing well after that experiment. So that was nearly a decade ago. And we were already discussing, well, how can we get the pursuit of longevity to become at least as popular as the war on cancer? Because at least people don't ideologically question the war on cancer. But David has said in our internal chat it would be worthwhile to discuss this to a greater extent in terms of where the war on cancer fell short of aspirations, especially as compared to the Apollo moonshot that John F. Kennedy inspired. But even with the Apollo moonshot, we did succeed in landing people on the moon, but humankind has not been back on the moon for now 53 years. So something there failed as well. It seemed like sometime in the mid 1970s, there came about this turn inward in the focus of a lot of, let's say, grand political projects and cultural aspirations. And that has really limited what we have been able to achieve in the physical world, whether on the macroscopic scale of space exploration and colonization or the microscopic scale of overcoming diseases, including aging. So I would welcome any thoughts on that. David, Liz, Bill, and anybody who wishes
What
to contribute.
happened? Literally, what happened? You know, in the 70s, there was so much movement towards science and technology, and even the suits, the moon suits that we that we actually built to take to the moon, can't even be replicated today. What happened to us? I mean, and what was the critical cocktail that created a society who was interested in these endeavors? You know, the 60s, look at when you just look at the architecture from the 60s, it's so cool. It's almost, you know, spacey. It's the retro vibe is almost like, you know, we were ready for aliens and everything else. And, you know, this round concept and these disc-shaped lanterns. And anyone who hasn't seen it, just go back and look at retro furniture. It was like we were really amp up in science and space and everything else, and then we just kind of didn't do it. In the culture towards risk aversion and playing the game of small iterations took over, and the cost of an education skyrocketed. You know, in the 70s, you could pay for a 4-year college with a minimum wage job, and I think you made $1.78, and you only had to work part-time. You know, today it takes, you know, 2 parents working and help from the grandparents and a loan often to get someone through a 4-year college. We have done a lot to block the future for humans, and it's quite devastating. The cost of housing is skyrocketed. Everything is kind of shutting out next generations and not really planning for them. This is I would say it's not just that science didn't stop. Something happened with the culture, and I think that sociologically would be worth studying.
Well, yeah, there's a great book that covers some of this actually, which is called "Where Is My Flying Car?" And it's kind of looking at, well, why didn't we get the flying cars and the, you know, electricity too cheap to meter, and vacations on the moon and all these things they were predicting back in the 1960s. And I won't go into it now, but there were, there was the environmental movement, and there was a shift towards against like a shift towards more regulation and things. But there was also a shift, well, I guess the thing I wanted to bring up, which was build off what Bill mentioned earlier. He mentioned how it's good to internalize. I think the term he used was internalize a lot of things. So like with the Apollo program, and also something like the Manhattan Project, it was a very large program that was sort of where all the components were operating together in a cohesive structure, where I won't say like rigidly hierarchical necessarily, but it was a comprehensive program, right, with thousands of people and millions of dollars. Whereas I feel like with cancer research, it's many small teams that are all working in sort of uncoordinated fashion. That's sort of my impression with biomedical research in general. So I think we may need to consider like a new model where the government or I guess private individuals fund larger teams. Something like Altos Labs actually comes to mind as an example.
Very interesting.
I wonder to what extent the lack of progress with the war on cancer can be attributed to sociological factors, as we're discussing now, changing culture, or to what extent it just was a much harder problem, technologically, biologically, than people had imagined. Because one reason that the war on cancer got going, due to the advocacy of people like Mary Lasker, is that there had been some progress against cancers in the previous decades. Sidney Farber famously made some breakthroughs in the treatment of leukemia for children, which previously had been a death sentence, and people never spoke about cancer, because if you got cancer, you were dead. That was it. Whereas there were some signs early on that some cancers could be cured. But it turned out that cancer was just much, much harder because there were so many different varieties to it. And arguably, they didn't really tackle it from the viewpoint that many of us on this call would now say, which is that by the time cancer exists, it's too late. It's because there's been lower level accumulation of damage, whether it's telomeres have got too short or mitochondria have stopped working, or there's been too many mutations in the DNA. All of these things are probably the earlier causes. So it may be that the reason cancer has not been cured as quickly as Nixon and others hoped for is it just was harder, and we need a deeper approach, which is what we are now bringing from the anti-aging point of view. So yeah, I'm sure there are sociological changes which would improve the culture, but I wouldn't want to say it's just people didn't organize themselves properly. I think maybe they needed to wait for the deeper tools and methods which we are now bringing, arguably from the fourth industrial revolution, the improvements in biotech and nanotech and AI, which we can apply, which weren't possible in the 1970s, and people didn't even know that they couldn't work. They didn't know how hard the problem was.
Yeah, and I think that to add to that point is that if you need evidence that we can extend lifespan, actually, it is a culture problem because it's already there. That's what open heart surgery is. In some cases, that's what taking an aspirin is for a very small percentage of the people who take aspirin, if you read the Cochrane report. But for some people, that's what it is. For some people, it's blood pressure medicine. So we have successful, so for some people, it's antibiotics and immunizations. So for many people, we have already extended lifespan. So if you need the evidence, it's actually clear as day that that's what medicine does. Okay, that's what science does. And I do agree with David, though, we're on the precipice of new medicine, but actually it's right in line with the old medicine. It's just a next generation. It's a reiteration of better medicine on top of what we already have, which is what we always used to accept until businesses got so big that they could shut it out. And, really, I implore you to take your health very seriously, because the idea that somebody else certainly has your back is just not the case. The biggest lobbyist in the United States is the pharma industry. They were embedded into the US FDA. They're trying to actually pluck that out now and create a more streamlined system. I still believe that best choice medicine is the only way. There's no sense in fixing something that's broken. But medicine has been good, so I'm not against what those iterations. They have definitively extended lifespan, and so if you need that evidence, it's already there, and actually just helping people see that is really important. But this is the next generation of better drugs, and I'm just asking the world to take a look at it, and that these different systems of design of businesses start to embrace it. But if we keep going back and we keep waiting for a mandate from, let's say, like solar, everybody was asking the energy industry to bring in solar, but the energy industry was an oil industry. So, I mean, who are you asking to change something? You have to change it. You have to change it as a society and as a mandate. And, Altos as a description of an initiative is fantastic, except for it's not really government funded. And the private industry can't fund everything. They have the most money probably, but they can't fund everything. So we need a mind shift. We need a shift on a groundswell of people who demand accuracy, and that we're providing accuracy to the best of our ability, and that we understand the limits in all systems, and that we use all systems to move forward, including AI and machine learning and different things that we already have. It has to be an integrational approach, but somehow we're going to have to trust a system and see that the system is trustworthy. People generally are using technology for good, and that we need to keep on that path and make sure that we don't stop here.
So I have some comments on cancer. I don't know how many other people on this call have been in the trenches working on cancer, but I've done a tremendous amount of cancer research. I was actually National Inventor of the Year for my cancer research in the United States. Because I've developed, as I said at the beginning of this thing, I've developed a lot of different treatments for cancer that have been approved in clinical studies, et cetera. But I can look back on all that and I can see lots of corruption. Okay, I've been involved in many clinical affairs meetings and et cetera on cancer drugs. I've developed cancer drugs that I said would never work, and they still got pushed forward. I came up with ideas on here's things we should be doing to cure cancer. And sometimes these weren't my ideas. I'm not a person would ever say not invented here. And this example is like working a lot with Liz on her ideas. I'm not working on them because they weren't invented here. I've pursued a lot of ideas that I thought were good ways to actually cure cancer. And I've got some projects here going on at Sierra Sciences right now that I think would be really great towards curing cancer. But funding blocks them, or trying to get grants, et cetera, to work on, and you can't do it because of various political issues and stuff. And I've seen many people apply, like this is the best example of all. When I was in graduate school and working in a plant lab, because there was a moratorium on recombinant DNA research at the time, so I couldn't work on mammalian cells. I was working with plants to do recombinant DNA research. The major professor that I had was having troubles getting grants. And so to study an organism called Euglena gracilis, which had chloroplasts. It's a single cellular organism. He was just doing studies on that. he couldn't get grant funding. So as a last desperate effort, he put the word cancer twice on every page in the application. And I thought, well, that'll never work. And then one day, the lab assistant comes running through the lab saying, we got approved, full amount. It's the Cancer Society approved a grant to study chloroplasts. And that's an example of the corruption that I've seen. And I don't think that would have ever happened in NASA. Okay, but I've seen a lot of great cancer ideas be poo-pooed for one reason or another, and partially because it's too expensive, take too long, or something like that, but at least it was in the direction of actually doing something. And I've seen a lot of drugs get moved forward that I was actually saying, that will never work, including some of the drugs that I invented that did get approved by the FDA. The best example is Rytelo, which has just been approved recently by clinical studies. It took 30 years to get approved because the cancers kept coming back. And that's what I kept saying back 30 years ago. I said, this will never work because it increases the risk that the cancers will find a way to mutate, to come back. And sure enough, it did, but it still got approved and they spent tons of money on it. I could go on and on. David, I know you were saying that maybe that's not the problem, but I strongly believe that the problem has been mismanagement of the National Cancer Institute and the amount of corruption and money being thrown away for useless things that made no sense, logical sense, because somebody was just interested in making a name for themselves or making a lot of money for themselves.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for sharing those observations. And recently on the U.S. Transhumanist Party website, we published an article of yours that included some of the situations that you related just now. The title was one that I had inserted into it, The Systemic Problems in Contemporary Academia and Research Funding, but it does speak to a lot of these issues where the institutions seem to be grievously flawed in a variety of respects. And there has been a discussion of peer review in our YouTube comments. So Daniel Tweed wants to know, how can we fix flawed peer review, especially since Liz had this experience with the questionable retraction of her paper. And Daniel also notes, if AI can fix broken peer review, that could be useful. So what are your thoughts on this? How do we fix flawed peer review, and can AI help, even if it doesn't provide the entirety of the solution?
I think that this is a really good question. Bill might have a better answer for that. So, I mean, the reason that a company like ours would do something at a university is because they have the equipment and the know-how. You know, we didn't touch the science that went into that paper. So that this is right under investigation right now. If there was anything wrong with that paper, that is the responsibility of the university and its scientists, and there will be accountability there. If it is because you can bully people for 3 years and then retract things so that the public doesn't have access to those things, I mean, why would that have happened? There's a lot of uncertainty here, and I know that we want to feel like we live in a perfect world, but we don't. There's a lot of agendas out there that I have found since I just came here as a mom, reaching out, trying to try drugs so that we had a better future. I have ran into the best people that I didn't even know existed that have just absolutely lightened my heart. And I have run up against absolute criminals and stalkers. And why they exist is because they make money existing doing what they do. There's special interest there. And I'm not sure what this is. We hope to get to the bottom of this. But and Bill might have a better idea of how do you actually keep peer review or keep science more sound. I know that when we started, one of the reasons that we went with a big university is because I was told, and I definitely quoted this in many talks, that 85% of papers were not reproducible. That means that science was building on science that was building on science, that potentially the first papers weren't even sound. And so when that paper that we did started to go through review, what a lot of people don't know is it went through 6 months of more science before it was even put through final review of everyone, due to one reviewer being so hardcore on making sure there was data to back up the data. And that was someone on this call. Bill put us through 6 months more of actual testing. So he was hard on it. I mean, pull your hair out hard on it, but I was glad because I had paid for it. And, our company in total put in over $1 million to make better science for humans and put it out in the public so that people could use that. So if there's something wrong with that, we're going to get to the bottom of that. But if there was nothing wrong with that, then all signs point to 3 years of sabotage. And one way or another, we need to know. Everyone on this call and everyone in the world needs to know.
I'm the reviewer from hell. All
You
right?
are the reviewer from hell.
I tell you,
God.
I am the toughest reviewer that you will ever find. I make certain that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed on everything. And, and just so you know, Liz, I don't know if I told you this, I did write to the journal, PNAS, and asked, why was this paper retracted? Because I have not heard a word. Nobody talked to me about it. I didn't hear that it was retracted until you told me. There's something terribly wrong here, because that paper is an excellent paper. And it's it had all the I's crossed and T's crossed, I's dotted and T's crossed, and I made certain of that. But I would say that the number one most important thing to make peer review more legitimate is to do away with this whole concept of publish or perish. Okay, this is why 90%, I don't know what Liz said, but I think 90% of the papers that are published now are not reproducible. And then what's really horrible is that then everybody else that thinks, well, this benefits them, they start referencing that paper, and suddenly there's 100 papers all saying the same thing, but when you read them all, 99 of them just reference that one paper. That's the only data. This is a really big problem. But people, to get grants, they have to have a lot of publications. That's why publish or perish. If you don't have a lot of papers published, you can't get a grant. And it's criminal. Okay, so as a result, people are publishing anything they can just to increase the number of publications on their list. This is one of the reasons that I walked away from academia 40 years ago. Okay, I just couldn't believe the games, the stuff that people had to go through to get their research done, and how much corruption there was, and how much illegitimate research was being done. So I chose to go into industry instead. I did find that still had its load of problems too, but since I started my own company, I have tried applying for grants. I got the grants, I returned them because of the fact that the small print had so many different control issues in them that it made it so that I couldn't do the research that I really wanted to do. Okay, but I right now I am frustrated. I don't publish anymore. I rarely publish. In fact, most of the publications that you'll see me an author on were written by other people. And there's been a lot of studies that I participated in where I refused to be an author because of the fact that the other authors were faking data, making things up, just trying to get and wanting to do press releases, just trying to get a lot of attention. It's just become too much of a circus. And
we tried to circumvent some of these issues that Bill was talking about because we looked into why would we go with a university and why would we write a contract a certain way. And we went over the contract with Rutgers for 8 months. Number one, we would fully fund it. So it never had to look for a grant. Number two, it didn't have to work. We had two gene modalities, gene delivery modalities, two different viral vectors that they could use. And if one didn't work, we would test the other one under the clause of the contract. And neither of them had to work. We couldn't retract the money if it didn't. And we felt like that was a very important stopgap to put in so that there wasn't a publish or perish situation within that science, because we didn't want to be in anything forced. My agenda is to get a combinatorial gene therapy to the public that is affordable. I will use drugs in humans. I will use them in my own body. The last thing we want is something that doesn't work. Okay. And in all of the talks that we had with that university and their scientists were around that. This was fully intended to go to humans. This was not a pet project. This was the money that my company had that we were given to do something ethical and sound with, and we did that. So we tried to make sure that those issues were not there. And again, we will go into a full investigation on this.
Yes, thank you very much, Liz and Bill. Now, Daniel Tweed writes, the Journal of Irreproducible Results was supposed to be a parody, but if such a huge percentage of results is irreproducible, I agree, it is the publish or perish mentality, the pressure to put something out there that survives the current peer review process, even if others cannot replicate those results. And Daniel also writes, the more powerful the entity, the less likely they are to admit a past mistake. There's probably a formula there. Well, there are fewer consequences for a more powerful entity. Now, since we have about 9 minutes left in our salon, I wanted to get to some additional questions. So let's hear from Alan Crowley. Let's see.
First, I want to say thank you for allowing us on the panel here. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I really like what you folks are doing here. I just like to say to Bill, I kind of get the hit and the miss with the developing medicines that work, and sometimes you develop medicines that don't, or whatever. I mean, in 2003, I had cancer, and I got treatment, surgery, and radiation, and then I've been cancer-free ever since. And it came down to early detection, adequate technology, just an amazing set of factors coming together. I thought. I mean, I was glad I was living now instead of any other time in the past, right? Because I think that description that, that David Wood's description about the way people considered cancer, like, oh, you got cancer? Okay, good to know you, right? You were dead at that point. And I think those ideas are changing. It was really refreshing.
Alan, I think you got put on mute. Let me see. I've unmuted you. Oh, no. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I was going to say to Liz, thank you for your passionate words about getting people with medication and the treatment, and just developing the attitude to look around. Medicine works for people. I mean, that's the thing. Let's put that at the forefront of what we're doing for human beings on the planet. Anyway, and thank you again. It's been a great discussion.
Yes. Thank you so much, Alan, for those good words. And yes, you were a beneficiary of modern medical science and technology. We have made some strides in the war on cancer. The mortality rates for most cancers have declined materially since the 1970s. There are still some very troublesome ones like pancreatic cancer and certain types of brain cancers where the mortality rate remains stubbornly high. But it is true that with all of the flaws of institutional medical science, major progress has still been made. And Luis Arroyo writes in the chat, the whole system needs to be done over. Well, I wouldn't want to throw away the good parts of the system. I wouldn't want to throw away the parts that have been able to generate the progress thus far. We just need to be vigilant as to the flaws and the bad incentives and fix those, and hopefully make a stronger, more robust system as a result that will be able to catch the stubborn causes of disease and death much earlier and fix them more efficaciously. Bill Andrews writes in the chat that he has never seen so many comments during a virtual Enlightenment Salon. Yes, there will be a way to provide them for reading afterward. They will be memorialized on YouTube the next morning after the video has finished processing. So hopefully you will be able to see all of those, and the public will be able to see them as well. Let's see if we can get in one more question or comment from Art Ramon in the last 4 minutes.
Just a quick comment. I'm thinking of doing some experimental treatment myself. I'm going to try the stem cells in January. Luckily, I don't have to leave the country for that one, but yeah, I'd be willing to volunteer for the experimental therapies, anti-aging.
Yes, thank you, Art Ramon. And we know that you are one of the individuals who is willing to give some of these experimental treatments a try. They've helped you to some extent, and really that underscores the importance of patient choice, patients who know best about their own symptoms, their own conditions, including some of the weird aspects of their health conditions that essentially enable them to accurately understand what are the options and what are some of the possibilities as well that emerging technologies have to offer. So now we have about 2.5 minutes, and I wanted to highlight a comment from David about institutional problems. Sadly, human flaws get in the way in almost every field, and those include power seeking, personal vanity, and those kinds of attributes. I think it's an ongoing question. How do we moderate the fallout from those tendencies? We can, of course, work on our cognitive biases. We can utilize various tools of thinking that philosophy and to some extent literature and art have made available to us throughout the ages. Transhumanism is a continuation, in my view, of humanism, and a lot of the insights of the humanist thinkers of the Renaissance, as well as the 18th century Enlightenment philosophers, can be applicable to our time as well. Eventually, we may be able to re-engineer human brains to get rid of some of these flaws, but I don't think we're there yet technologically. So now, in the last minute of our salon, Bill and Liz, do you have any final words for our audience on this admittedly vast topic?
I do, just really quick. I emphasized aging too much during my presentation, but I want to point out that elimination of the longer lived to increase the survival of the species also depends on our cancers, our heart disease, all these other things that all the other diseases, and we have to focus on all those, not just aging.
Yes, point well taken. Thank you, Bill. And Liz, any final words for our salon?
Well, I think it's just imperative that, we work together and we critically analyze the situation. We don't sugarcoat it, and we certainly don't wait. And that, we en masse pick up this agenda as the agenda of this party. Gennady, you are an amazing manager of this whole Transhumanist Party. It needs to be. I know. Isn't Dan? He's amazing. This part of it wouldn't happen without you. But we need the expansion of manpower here now, and we need the expansion of good ideas. And we need to disconnect ourselves from other maybe connections that have been unhealthy for our area. So by bringing in, good people that might be able to help with this and push towards this agenda, I think that we will be able to bring better health and actually deliver on what you have vastly built here once you came to this party. So I just want to really thank you. And I want to thank everyone who has spent time watching this and who is considering helping here. This is not a party lines sort of initiative. This is a health initiative for the world, and it just so happens to be spearheaded from people who exist in an idealistic mindset that we can do better and that we should do better. And that we shouldn't actually wait for someone else. When you look in the mirror, you need to say, who's going to do this? I'm going to do this because I can't wait for someone else to do this. And
Yes.
Together we can do better.
Together we can do better. Thank you very much, Liz and Bill. I am honored by your good words, and this was a wonderful virtual Enlightenment Salon. Our audience is echoing that sentiment right now. Your work is crucial, and I think best choice medicine is crucial. We will do all we can to advance it so that we can all live long and prosper.